Hi, I'm Kim Cooper, the owner of Creative Cake Concepts, and today I'd like to talk about a fun holiday cake that you can create, and we're going to go through it step by step. So what you see in front of me is what is going to be the base tier of this cake. What we're going to do first is talk about what it's sitting on, which is a cake drum. Now there's a difference between a cake drum and a cake board. You'll notice that a cake board is thin cardboard, has a grease-proof top side, cardboard underside. With a cake drum, you notice these are a 1/2 inch thick, this one is, and they can support more weight. When you do a multi-tier cake, you really need to put it on a cake drum so that your work of art is supported. Now, one of the things that I do with my cake drums is I glue with a glue gun onto the bottom side a cake board 2 inches smaller than my cake drum. What this allows me to do is get my fingers under the cake drum when I lift up a cake. It's a lot easier than trying to scramble and get your fingers under your cake to pick it up if it doesn't have that. So it's one little tip for you. So when we look at this cake, you'll notice that it has a variety of stripes. A couple different colors, different widths. What we're going to do first is talk about how to map out those stripes. You can figure out your color scheme, and then what you need to do is measure your total height. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, it'll work out where you have a 1 inch stripe, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1/2 inch. That's what I was hoping was going to happen here. Unfortunately, when I measured the height of my cake, it was 5 3/4 inches high. So I had to actually come up with some custom width stripes. Easy way to accomplish that is to take a piece of plain paper, measure it the height of your cake, and then plot out your stripes. So in my case, I had 1 1/16 inch stripes and 1/2 inch stripes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a smaller tier, and I'm going to show you how exactly to start your stripes. You're going to start from the bottom so that each stripe then has support, and you'll work your way up to the top. So we're going to put this one aside. Actually, we're going to bring in this little 6 inch tier. Now this has been covered in buttercream. You can also put stripes on fondant. However, the end result is going to give you a much thicker layer of fondant because you have a fondant covering and then you have fondant stripes. I really like working on a nice crusting buttercream, which is what we have here. So a couple of the tools that you're going to need. To measure and get your first stripe on there, I really recommend this Wilton product, which is a measuring device that will give you the height of your stripes. So I've already measured this, and what we're going to do is we're going to have 1 inch stripe on the base in red, and then we're going to follow it with a 1/2 inch white. To get my first stripe, I'm going to position this on the cake drum, and I'm going to slowly turn my cake so that I have a scored line where the top of that stripe is going to be. So once that's done, you need to go ahead and roll out your first stripe, whatever color. We're going to do red. I'll move this aside. And I have some red fondant here. Now, in order to get the length of the stripe that you need, measure the diameter of your tier. This is a 6 inch tier by 3.2. Now pi is 3.14. If you multiply that times pi, you'll get the circumference of your cake. But 3.2, and it gives you a little bit longer. So in this case, I need at least 18.5, probably 19 inches to wrap around the cake. So we're going to knead our fondant, get that softened up. And actually, I think I need a little bit more. Now this first stripe, I'm not going to cut at the 1 inch. I'm going to cut it a little wider, a little more generous, so that it drapes onto the cake board, and then we'll trim it from there. So once I have this kneaded, I'm going to make it into kind of a log. I'll make sure we dust the work surface with a little cornstarch or powdered sugar. And then start to flatten it and draw it out. I'm actually going to use a pasta roller attachment on my mixer. This gives me a nice consistent thickness throughout the stripe. But if you do not have a pasta attachment, it's no worries. Just make sure you roll it as consistent as possible, because every stripe is going to stack onto the next one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this over to the mixer now. All right, so that's definitely long enough. Take that back to our work surface. And what I'm going to do is use a pizza cutter, and I want one nice crisp edge. Put fondant back into the plastic wrap. Make sure you do that so that it doesn't dry out in between your stripes. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of cornstarch on there, and I'm just going to start rolling this up loosely. The reason I put the cornstarch on there is to make sure that the fondant doesn't stick to and become one log once I get this all rolled up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to follow that line that we made. And we're just going to go around the cake, unrolling this as you go. Trying not to overly stretch it, because we don't want thinner spots on the edge that the next strip is going to rest upon. I get to the end and I'm just going to tear off the rest of this. And then you can go back and make sure that you are on that line. See, that part's a little low. Now, this place that we have overlapped, I'm going to take a very sharp knife at the overlap, and we're going to come in and cut through both. Pull that off, reach under there, take that other little piece off. That way you know you have edges that match. And then work that back. All right. So now you just go around, make sure that this is smooth to your cake. And we'll take a fondant smoother, go around that bottom edge. And once you know you've got your positioning right and everything smooth, you're going to come back in with your pizza cutter, and we are going to trim around the excess. Just turning your turntable until you get back to the beginning. Let me just peel that extra off. Now, if you've got a little bit of buttercream that has squished out the bottom, no problem. Just go around and you can clean that up. So we already have our first stripe on the cake. So now it's just a matter of building upon that. So the next stripe we're going to do is the 1/2 inch white. So put that back in the plastic wrap. And we take out our white. Again, this can be any color. This would be effective doing it in an ombre, blues maybe for a little boy shower cake, pinks for a girl. Can really customize it and make it your own. So, kneading the fondant, again rolling it out back out to a log just to get it started. Make sure that your work surface is dusted. And then we'll go back to the pasta roller attachment. And now we come back. So now on this stripe, make sure that that's nice and dusted so it doesn't stick to our surface. For this next stripe, I decided that I want it to be 1/2 inch. So on this, we're going from 1 inch to 1/2 inch and back and forth. I'm going to use a strip cutter. There are a couple different ones on the market. This is already set up so that it will cut a 1/2 inch strip. And we're just going to press evenly all the way down our work surface. And remove the excess. And if you haven't gotten all the way to the end, just nip it off with a knife. Now sometimes with these strip cutters you will have one side that maybe didn't press hard enough, that has not cut evenly all the way through. You can just go back with your pizza cutter and run down that line, which I'm having to do here. Just making sure that you get a nice crisp edge. All right, so we take that extra. Any places that are not even, just true up. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with the red. I'm going to dust this and roll it up like a little cinnamon roll. All right. Again, rolling just helps so that if you try and drape this around on the cake drum and then pick it up and put it in position, it's just going to sag and pull out of shape. Sometimes it's fiddly to get this going. And you'll wind up with a strip that's not even and thinner in some spots. What we're going to do is, you see that's the seam. Now on your cake you will wind up with a seam all the way up one side. This could be the back side of your cake so it won't be seen, or you can plan a decoration that you would attach here that covers that seam up. So what we're going to do is start a little past that seam, because we're going to want to join, overlap, and cut. And we're just unrolling it, lightly tapping it into position. You can fiddle with it more once you get the buttercream just to hold it. So basically you see I'm just unrolling, not pulling, and getting that stripe attached. Okay, I'm going to tear off that excess. Okay. And we've got that little overlap. Straighten them up so that they are in line with one another. And just make a nice clean cut. I found that it's not really necessary to put gum glue between the seams on the buttercream cake. It really just seems to set in there well. But if you're having trouble with the stripes moving or not joining, then just take a little bit of gum glue. Now gum glue is water with a little bit of Tylose powder added to it. All you need to do is, if I were going to do the next stripe and I wanted to use the gum glue, I would just dip this in, make sure it's not super wet, and then run it around the top edge of that stripe all the way around the cake. When I see that it's damp, got back to the beginning. Now if you feel like you're having some openings here, you can just put a little gum glue in there and push it together. Okay, so that's how we've done the stripes on the base tier of the cake. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to bring the base tier back in and have a conversation about proper support structures for putting your top tier and decorating the top tier. As you can see, we brought the base tier back in, and I've also brought in the top tier. Now the top tier has simply been covered with red fondant, and it has a black stripe. The way that we put the black stripe on is just the same way as we did the stripes on the base tier. I used my measuring marker, made a mark in the fondant where I wanted that band to be, applied it to the cake, put a seam in the back. So now we can't just take this top tier and put it on here and move on, because what's going to happen is this will sink into the fondant in the cake on top. So we have to make sure that it is properly supported. In order to do that, since this is just a 6-inch tier, I'm going to use bubble tea straws. Now, when you use the bubble tea straws, there's a couple of things. First, when you look at your cake, this looks very level, but you really need to look down at the top of the cake and see, are there any low spots? Because when you start building a multi-tier cake, if there is a low spot and you cut your bubble tea straws to a higher spot, over the height of a cake, when you add on, it's going to start to tilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get down and I'm going to look, and it seems to be that I have a lowest spot on this top is here. I'm going to take the bubble tea straw, I'm going to push it down through the fondant, through the cake. I'm going to find that low spot, put my thumb there, pull it up, and clip that off. You want to make sure that you clip it as straight as possible. So then what I'm going to do is I'm very carefully, I'm going to support that on either side. I'm going to wiggle that out. It's got a little bit of cake in there. I'm going to take it, hold it so that the bottoms are even, and I'm going to cut another. Once I've got this position, I can go ahead and put that back, cut that. So in order to support a 6-inch round, I usually put in 4. Since this was a taller cake, usually on a standard height tier, you can get 2 supports out of 1 bubble tea straw. I forgot this is a little taller. So again, now I'm getting 4 supports that are all at the same height as my lowest spot. And push those down in. There's one. I try and find a halfway spot right across from that one. Push in another. Go in between those so that I'm a couple of inches in from the edge of the cake. And again. So now I know I have a stable foundation for placing this top tier. Now my top tier has been constructed sitting on a 6-inch round cake board. I'm going to use an offset spatula just to get underneath that edge so that I can lift it up. And then I'm going to use a larger lifter to get up underneath there. And that's going to help me support this as I put this on. I've got a little piece of non-skid under there. So I have the seam on the back of this cake from the stripes that we made. I'm going to put that as the back of my cake. On this top tier, I put that little black band on there, and there's my seam there. I'm actually going to also rotate this so that's to the back of the cake as well. Then I'm simply going to use this to support the back edge, and I'm going to place this on that cake top. Now while this is under there, you can use it to kind of scooch it around to find your center. And that looks pretty good. So as you can see, I have the back of my cake. I'm not worried about that. The front is going to be the focal point. So now this top tier is going to be perfectly supported on the base tier, but we're not done. If you go to move this cake, say take it to your holiday table or take it to a client's home, this is not secured. So what we're going to do is take a wooden dowel and push it down through the cake. Now, I do have toppers on this cake planned, so they're going to cover the hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking at that, and you see that that's still going to be way above the top of the cake. But I do want this to anchor down into that cake drum, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look, I'm going to say, that's about the top height, and I'm going to come down maybe about another ½ inch. Take a good sturdy pair of scissors, score your skewer, and then just snap it off. So I am going to actually just go right in the center as I have the topper plan that will cover that. Push it down, and the resistance that I'm feeling is that first cake board underneath this 6-inch. What you're going to do is you're actually going to take a hammer to your cake. You're going to tap it, and that sharp end goes straight through that cake board. And now we want to drive it so that it secures into that cake drum so that this tier can't shift or slide off of this base tier. When you get all the way down, take a remnant of another skewer, put it right on top, and tap it. And you can hear that it went into the cake drum, and you can wiggle that out. So now you have a very stable cake. You can come back in, you can put a little piece of red fondant on there to cover that hole, or say that this was a buttercream iced tier. Very simple. Just go in with a little bit of buttercream and ice up that hole. So I'm taking a little bit of fondant here, just so that I don't have a visible hole. I'm using a little bit of gum glue. Just going to wiggle that in the hole. Again, this is just cosmetic so that I don't have a hole in the top of the cake. I'm going to take this, I'm going to roll it into just like a little plug, little log, and push it in. Sometimes you'll find that you need a little bit bigger. And again, this is just so that you have like this little button covering up the hole. All right. So that's how to properly support a multi-tier cake. If this were a 3-tier cake, I would, again, put in more bubble tea straws. The next, say, a 4-inch tier would go on top of this, and then I would take the skewer. In that case, I would have put this one offset, not right in the middle. The second one, I would go off to the other side. So in this case, I would have put this skewer here if I had a third one, put that tier on, and then the final one would go through the cake board on this, cake board on here, and then down into that drum. So you have a very stable structure. Okay. So now let's talk about decorating this cake. One of the elements that I was going to put on here is this a little reminiscent of Santa, Santa's belt. Santa needs a buckle. So that's what we're going to make next. So I'm going to put this off to the side and show you how we make the buckle. So let's start to decorate this cake. I envision this as being Santa with his belt and a big buckle. What I've done is I've cut out of gum paste a square and a square and made a little prong that we're going to wind up painting with gold dust to make the buckle. All I did was took some white gum paste. You're going to dust your work surface. Make sure that this is really kneaded well. Now, a tip with the gum paste, if you feel that it is dry and really stiff, put it in the microwave and just on 50% power for maybe 5-10 seconds and keep checking. It winds up getting a lot softer. So, in order to make this be a little thicker, I have 2 little wooden dowels that I'm going to put on the work surface, and I'm going to roll my gum paste between those so that I have some weight and some depth to the buckle. I'm going to take my first square cutter, cut out shape, carefully release it from the cutter so that you're not changing the shape or making dents. I'm going to take probably 2 sizes smaller of a cutter, and you want to be really careful looking at all sides. Is it centered in the same space on all 4 sides? Once you figure that you've got it, carefully push down. Make sure you've got a clean cut and carefully push that off. So now I've got my buckle, this shape. I'm going to set that one aside. I'm going to take it and put it on a cake dummy, and I've just cut a cake dummy that is the same diameter as my top tier because you want to have that same curvature. If I put this on just a flat surface, then the buckle is just going to stand out. By putting it on the cake dummy, it has that nice little curve to it and fits your cake nice, a little more streamlined. It looks a little nicer. So we've got the square. So now we need this prong for the buckle. Just take a piece of gum paste, roll it into a log. You may have to do it a couple times so you figure you get the right diameter, making sure that it's nice and smooth. So, and to figure out your length, you can just take this and set it inside so that maybe it hits about the middle. Come out to your edge. You can hold it with your finger, take a little cut. Now, what I'm going to do, you see that just kind of stands up on that edge. In order to make it lay a little flatter, I'm going to take the dull edge of the knife, and on one side, I'm going to come in about 1/4 inch and I'm going to press. Now, that's made this little indentation. I'm going to look at it. It's a little flared out there. I'm just going to take that and kind of bring it back in again. Now, I've got this little indentation that when I put this on the buckle, it sits a little nicer. So, like I said, you're going to put this aside for a day or two. This is something that you can make in advance, and then that way when you go to put it on a cake, it's very firm and stable, not going to shift and sag out of shape on you. All right, so once we have the buckle, it's dried, you're ready to put it on the cake. I wanted this to be gold. So instead of attaching it to the cake and painting it, you can do that, but it's difficult to get into these edges without touching your fondant on the cake. So what I like to do is paint it in advance. So what I have here is just some gold dust. I'm going to add a little lemon extract. Now you can also use clear alcohol, grain alcohol, or vodka. We're going to take that, put that in there, get the gold so that it is kind of like a paint. You don't want it really runny, but, and then all we're going to do is paint this. And I always recommend painting, working on a paper towel that you can take away. All right. And that way, I don't have to worry about touching the cake with it. So, I've got that buckle painted. I can go ahead and do the same thing with the prong. Again, this would be very difficult to get done on the cake without having a whoops. So, I'm gonna hit that in the end, and there we have Santa's buckle. Now, if you wind up having any spots that are missed or that you touch, you can always touch those up a lot easier when it's on the cake, once you've got a base coat on. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and attach this to the cake. Now you can use candy melts to attach it, or a little bit of melted chocolate. What I'm going to do is just use a little bit of royal icing. I also have a couple of pins, straight pins, and I try and pick a color that's different from my project. In case I have a problem with it sagging, you can put a couple pins right underneath, and if we need this, we'll probably need it on the prong. We'll put that on, put it in a different color so that before you present your cake, you make sure that you remove your pins. So now remember, with our buckle, we have a curve, so you have to make sure that you put that on the cake properly. I'm going to turn this upside down. I'm using royal icing. A little bit more royal icing now, that's sticking a little bit. You don't want to lock because we don't want it to squish out the sides. Usually some will, and you can easily clean that up with a craft brush. All right, so that should be enough to hold that on there. So again, checking our curve, we're going to come over to the cake. I know that the seam is the back, so I'm going to reach right around to where I think the front will be, and I'm going to place it. Now you see, there is a little bit of royal icing that has squished out of there. I'm going to take my clean brush, I'm going to reach under there and just flick that away. So, I want to give it a little pressure, make sure that it sticks. Okay, so it looks like that's on there. And we're not sliding, so I don't think I'll need to use any pins. So just a nice little wiggle, and it's secure. So then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the prong. I'm not really sure where it's going to touch the cake, so I'm going to go ahead and see my royal icing is pretty dry. So here's another little thing you can do. Just moisten it up a little bit before it touches the cake. Again, we can clean this up once it's on that cake. All right. So, and take that prong and position it right in the middle of the buckle. Okay. You push just slightly so that the prong pushes into this fondant. It'll make a little bit of a pocket to kind of support that. So we'll keep an eye, but it looks like right now that this is very stable. So I can see some spots where it is, the gold is kind of rubbed off from my handling it. But now this is an easy thing to touch up. Again, I've got my gold dust with my lemon extract. I'm going to come back in here and touch up. That way Santa has a nice shiny buckle. And there you have it. So that's our decoration for the top tier. The next thing we're going to do is talk about doing the snowflake toppers and some of the side decorations. So we've gotten our little top tier decorated with Santa's buckle. Now what we're going to do is make the 3D snowflakes for the topper, one that's going to sit on the cake drum, and then some other little snowflakes that will go around the base tier. So what I have used is this cutter set. It has large, medium, and small snowflake shapes, and it also has small little cutters to cut out some of the intricate design in the middle. You can really customize these, make your snowflake look however you would like it to look. Now, with these, I'm also going to use these plunger cutters, and these come in a small, medium, and large, and I'll show you how we're going to put those in some of the empty spots on the base tier. So with these, you want to make sure, just like the buckle, that you do this a couple of days in advance. You really have to make sure that these are really dry. Now, some areas are more humid than others, so your drying time may be 2 days, maybe 3 or 4 days. Just make sure that these are really nice and dry before you try and use it as a topper. So I've got a large, a medium, and kind of a smaller shape already cut out. And let me just show you how I did that. I took this shape and then this little pattern from the inside, and I'm going to use a piece of gum paste that is the same thickness as the buckle. We want it substantial so that when we put it on the cake, we're going to have something that's not going to want to crack and fall over easily. Go ahead and dust the surface, taking the cutter, push down. Make sure that you've got a nice edge with no feathers on the sides. What I like to do is flip it over and just make sure that all those edges are nice and crisp and clean. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. Carefully push it out so that you don't distort the shape. Put that aside. And now this is a little shape that I'm going to go ahead and just do some cutouts. And what I did, as you can see, this has a little point. I kind of lined that up with one of these points on the snowflake. So I put the point towards this point, and then the little divot on this one angling towards the point on the other side of the snowflake. Push down. Again, make sure you've got a clean cut. Support it as you wiggle it out. Now, you may need the end of a paintbrush or a skewer to push that out. So I've got that shape. I'm going to turn it around so you see that one. And I'm going to make sure that this little divot is pointed towards that point. This point is pointed to here. That way everything is kind of lined up. And in nature, snowflakes are no two alike, so you don't stress it that much. Wiggle it out without distorting the snowflake. Pop that out. All right, so I'm done with that. And then again, I just want to smooth out that little join of that little cutter. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So now just set this aside for 2 to 3 days until it's really, really dry. So I'm going to move that there. Plunger cutters are the easiest thing in the world to use. As you see, I have these. These were made out of gum paste. Now, you need to roll these and kind of play with the thickness. If they're too thick, they won't pop out of the plunger cutter. So what I found, if you're using a pasta roller, I found that on the 2 setting, that it is thin enough that it will pop out and not get stuck. So plunger cutter, pull it up, and then pop it out. You may get a little, if that happens, just straighten it up. And then put these again on a piece of foam, piece of paper towel, as long as they're nice and flat, and set them to dry. So I like to wiggle it around, pull that off. Again, take it, pop it. I love plunger cutters. They are the simplest things to use. We'll do, actually, you can see I also have a small, but I'm going to show you, you'll see here why I have some of these cut in half. And the reason that I did this is I had the thought that we might take some of these half snowflakes and attach them to the side of the cake standing out. So easy thing, make sure that you have a sharp knife and then just cut from this little center point to that little point, cut it in half, and then put these off to dry. And again, with these are more delicate than these. They're a lot thinner. Make sure that you do extra. I would say at least cut 10% more than what you think you're going to need, because they will break. So again, just plan ahead, plan for you have breakage. If you don't have breakage, then you can use these pieces to adorn cupcakes. Okay, so now once we have these cut out, you've got them dry, we're going to do what we did with the buckle. We're going to jazz these up a little bit. If you look at these snowflakes, they're pretty, but they're just kind of a flat white. If you brush them with a little pearl dust, they really stand out and have a much more finished look. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the buckle. Protect your work surface. Take your snowflakes. Now what I'm using is Crystal Colors Bright Silver Dust. I'm going to take this, I'm just going to tap a little bit into the lid here. Going to use our lemon extract. Again, you can use clear grain alcohol, vodka, whatever works for you. Going to make that into a little bit thinner than a paste. And then just brush them. Dries very quickly, and it adds that sheen and shimmer. I'm also going to do that to these larger pop-up 3D snowflakes. I'm going to go ahead and do the large one. Now I'm not going to do the backs right away, because on the back I'm going to attach our candy sticks so that it will hold it into the cake. So I don't want that dust there to make sure that the candy melt will actually attach to the gum paste. After you have it attached, you can go ahead and dust it at that point. Okay, so now we have our snowflakes cut out, they're dry, we've painted them with pearl dust. Now we're going to go ahead and make that top snowflake topper. So I've got my dried snowflake, I've done a coat of luster dust. I'm going to go ahead and flip this upside down, and I'm going to use these sucker sticks to attach with some chocolate, Merkin's chocolate melts. and we're just going to go ahead and put a little bead of candy melt there and attach that stick. Now, you see we need a little support underneath that. So I'm going to use one of those little cutouts from the other snowflake to hold the end of that stick up until this dries. Make sure that we don't have any that is going into our design there. We're going to let that dry up. So, being that this is so large, I'm actually going to put a second one in for support. So, put a little of the candy melts there. And take this, put another one of the little supports underneath. Let's see if we're relatively straight and even with the other one, so that these are parallel. And it's okay that one's longer than the other. So I'm going to go in and make sure that we have enough candy melt attached to the snowflake and to that stick that it is kind of encapsulated. And again, this is the back side, so it's fine. So there's one. Let's see if we can carefully move this out of the way. And it's already starting to seize. And you don't want to rush it. You want to make sure that those are really cooled enough. All right, so let's go ahead and do another. This one I'm going to position on the cake with that. And then you kind of have to make a choice. This is smaller. Will it stand up on its own with one? And I think that we'll be in good shape. And trying to decide, is it going to balance on these 2 points, or do you want it this way? Understand that if you do it this way, it's going to be a little unstable. So I'm going to go ahead and try and put the stick in so that it would actually sit on these 2 points on the cake and have a little bit more stability. So now what I'm just doing is I'm looking for a place where I can put this stick so that I don't see that coming right down the center of the design. Where can I put it? May not be possible, but we're going to try. And I may wind up coming in at an angle. Nope. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, because this is going to be the safest way to hold this. I'm going to put that there, and then we'll come in and we'll use one of our little itty bitty snowflakes to cover up that stick when you look at it from the front. So let's go ahead and put that on there. Again, taking the candy melt, putting a line right up in the middle. I didn't mention this before, kind of when I put this on here, I take it and I kind of twist it so that the stick gets completely coated. So that's in there straight. Come in, make sure I've got the top. Go over, put some anchor points, attach that to the side, and like so. Again, this is your back side. I've got one of those other little cutouts, but I don't think we're going to need it. Okay, I'm going to put that there to dry. All right, so while those are drying, I also have all of these other snowflakes. What I want to do is kind of find a place on here. Now this is where, if you have imperfections in your cake, say your stripe is a little wonky, you can put your snowflakes or your decorations on places to hide those imperfections. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to have a large snowflake in the middle, that smaller one off to one side. So I think I'm going to come over and put this snowflake here. Now again, you can attach this with royal icing, or you can just do a little candy melt. Now this guy is going to sit on these two little feet, or supports. And I'm looking at that, I don't see any candy melt sticking out, and that'll just take a minute, and then that's going to be really secure. Let's see how we are here. Okay, so I'm going to give that another minute. Now, when you are looking at these snowflakes and say, why did we do half snowflakes? These are ones that I think that we're going to just go ahead and add here and there on the sides. But what you have to make sure you do, which I didn't do, is put a little luster dust on the back, because now these are three-dimensional and you will see the back side. So just do a little, you guess, walk around the back side of your cake and you're finished. Okay, so we're just going to do 2 of those. All right, so let's see if we can, yep. Now, if you are on a time crunch and you really want these to set up quickly, you can also get a can of freeze spray, spray that, and make sure that it'll seize up and chill very quickly, and it'll be hard. So now what I want to do is take these, and I want to paint that back side. Much easier to do it while it's laying here than when it is up on the cake. You don't have to worry about drips down on your cake. So this is the way I like to do it. And again, this is the back side, but it'll give a little shimmer if somebody walks around. All right. There we go. So that one's done. So what I'm going to do is very carefully take this and support it. I'm going to look for the center of the cake, like so. And you don't want to jam it down pushing on the snowflake. You want to take your sucker sticks, make sure we're going to be, yep, that'll work. Just equally, same time, drop that down onto the cake. Feel like you're going a little the wrong angle, and back her up and push her in. Now, tip when you get to this point, if you have a pair of needle nose pliers, you can take these and gradually pull down. And that way you have a little more room than having your fingers in the way. All right, so now you see a little bit of the treat stick there. You can either pull this out, we can cut it, or you can come back in and you could just take a baby snowflake, which I think we're just going to do that and make it easy and done. Tiny bit of candy melt there. I'm going to turn this to me and put a little snowflake there. All right, so let's go ahead and get the other one. This is now set up. Quickly brush the back of this one. And again, if you see any spots on the snowflake that you already have up, you can touch it up once it's on the cake, and I'll show you how to protect your cake surface when you're doing that. Okay. All right. So now I'm just looking about where I would want this, and I want a little bit of space between. It makes it more interesting than being flat up against. So I'm going to come out about an inch away from that one. Make sure that my sucker stick will go to the bottom of my tier without hitting the cake board, which it will. We're going to go ahead and push that down in there. Get my fingers out of the way. And we're down on the cake. So So those are your large 3D toppers. Now what you can do is come back in with your other little snowflakes. And those you just kind of have to see, where do you feel like you have empty spots? And where would a little snowflake look nice? And again, this is also your opportunity to hide flaws. And we've all done that. Okay. See. Sometimes with the plunger cutters, if you notice on these, when they dry, you wind up with a little bit of an indentation. So what I'm having to do is add more candy melt to kind of fill up that void. So we'll go back to where we were, because it wasn't quite sticking. All right, let's see, put on another couple. How about something like that? So a large one. Put that right in the middle of that green. It really stands out well and makes that pop. Okay, so now these three-dimensional ones, if you want to, you could add these to the cake. I'm actually going to do this on the back because I'm kind of liking how this looks right now, and I don't think I want anything popping out here. So let me just show you how you could do this. And we'll do this on the back side of the cake. You would just run a little bit of candy melt on the edge and a little dollop on the back. And come in here and just stick it on. Now, what you can do is, you see there's a little bit of candy melt. You can come in there with your pearl dust and then just touch this. You really can't wipe a lot of it away because that's what's adhering it to your cake. So I think I'm going to leave it like so. Maybe we add a little bitty one somewhere. Sometimes less is more. I'll do this little guy here. So, there you have it. This is our snowflake holiday cake tutorial. Hi, I'm Kim Cooper, the owner of Creative Cake Concepts. I was asked by my friends at CakeSuppliesOnSale.com to put together a holiday cake tutorial. So this is what I've put together for you. And all of the products, the supplies, the cutters, the gum paste, the fondant, all came from Cake Supplies on Sale. I hope you find a technique or two that you can use in creating a holiday cake.